The Imperial Temple Orphanage, a place where many saints and holy ones have been born, was home to one child whom everyone despised. Her name was Bells. She was seen as nothing but trouble, a terrible child even among her peers. They all loved their belief that she could never become a saint. On the other hand, Diana Barrelot, age 5, was as bright as the sun, completely opposite to her. They say darkness is only as deep as the light is bright. Bells was the impurity of this sacred place. She was born in Aria, a holy nation where nobles and commoners alike worshipped the goddess who granted the temple unparalleled power and prestige. Its history was filled with miracles performed by saints, but there was one figure who could never be excluded from the legacy of Aria: the saint, the flower of the temple. From the orphanage where she lived, many saints and holy ones of extraordinary fame were born. The children of the orphanage were said to be blessed by the gods and naturally gifted. Belle's ability was the power of healing, a gift that once had her mentioned as a candidate for sainthood. But she never advanced beyond that status because of Diana. They were the same age, entered the temple at the same time, and both possessed healing powers. However, while Belle struggled to heal even small wounds, Diana could heal people instantly, something only the saints of legend could achieve. Diana was an angelic child, kind and sweet to everyone, whether child or adult. Belle's was constantly compared to her, another failed candidate next to Diana. At first, she tried to surpass her, but everything fell apart when Diana's sponsor appeared. The sponsor was Marquis Berlot. Rumors swirled that her family had abandoned Diana at the orphanage and were now returning out of guilt over leaving their illegitimate child behind. Even though both girls were candidates, Diana and Belle's were different from the start. They were never destined to be the same. Diana was chosen, and Belle's was left behind. A few years later, an incident at the orphanage left Belle's not only without her healing power, but also without her healing eyes, the ability to see where people were in pain. She spent her days in complete helplessness. Then one day, Duke Callios and his young son came to visit. She could hardly believe it. Someone with no powers like her was suddenly being granted a sponsor. But she knew that, just like everyone else, they would be disappointed in her and revoke the sponsorship. She would rather not receive such fleeting kindness in the first place. However, that was when she noticed the young master. His black hair shimmered like the night sky, and his sharp, golden eyes sparkled with unwavering belief. He was young Duke Edwin of Callios, a prince straight out of a fairy tale. The moment she saw him, all her unease vanished. Even as the adults questioned her sponsorship, she suddenly pointed at the young duke and declared, "I want him to be mine." The priest panicked in fear, apologizing profusely and ordering her to take back her words. And so, she became part of the duke's household. At least, that was what she thought. But humiliation and rumors followed her even there. Even after she grew up and her status changed, she remained an outcast who did not fit anywhere. Meanwhile, the name of Lady Diana spread far and wide. She was said to have healed the sick empress, and everyone believed she would be this generation's saint. This was also the reason why young Duke Edwin was engaged to her. Upon hearing this, Belle's grabbed her hair in frustration. She could not stand that name, Diana. No matter where she went, Diana's shadow always loomed over her. No matter how hard she struggled, she could never even reach Diana's toes. In the end, Diana even took away the most precious person to her. She had everything, yet she still wanted more. One day, a crown prince's aide came to see Belle's. He revealed to her that Diana's family, along with the second prince, was plotting to assassinate the emperor. They proposed a plan. They handed her supposed evidence of treason and instructed her to plant it in the Marquis's house. She found it strange. Why entrust such a major task to her? And why place the evidence at the Marquis's house instead of handing it directly to the guards? But the idea of finally separating Diana from Edwin clouded her judgment. Blinded by jealousy, she acted without thinking. However, the real plan was something else entirely. She was nothing more than an easy pawn to use, and she realized this only after everything was over. Without a chance to defend herself, she was caught with the poison and arrested as the culprit who had attempted to poison the saint. Soon after, they found the letter in her room, tying her to treason. She was framed for that crime as well. Later, she learned that the evidence implicating the Marquis Berlode and the second prince had been altered to instead frame the Duke of Calios and the Crown Prince. The House of Calios, a legendary family celebrated as heroes with centuries of honor and glory behind them, fell from grace and became traitors, all because of her greed. Even as she stood on the execution platform, she kept asking herself, "Why does this only happen to me?" Only at the moment of her death did she finally realize the truth. She was nothing but a minor villain in a trashy novel. At that moment, it all became clear. This world was, in fact, a novel, one about a woman's trials, triumphs, and love as she overcame hardship to become a saint. The title was destined to become a saint. And of course, Diana was the protagonist, not her. Every significant person she had known was nothing more than a potential male lead destined to love Diana. Bells? She was just a rival, written to fail in every way possible. Everything had been orchestrated for Diana. She was merely a tool for the original story. Regret consumed her as she closed her eyes for the last time. But when she opened them again, she was alive, back in her 5-year-old body, the outcast of everyone once more. She was certain she had died. So how was this possible? Had her actions deviated from the original story? Suddenly, a nun entered the room and asked if she had finished her preparations. Bells glanced at her, feeling an eerie sense of déjà vu. The nun scolded her, reminding her that Diana had already completed all her lessons and that the temple was expecting a high-ranking noble to preach. This was the priest who had given her the most trouble in her past life. Remembering this, Bells glared at her with murderous intent. The nun shoved her aside, calling her a creep. Then, the nun began coughing. Bells knew why. She had an incurable disease that would soon take her life. But this time, Bells would not tell her. The healing eye has the ability to identify injuries and their causes based on the color emitted by the patients. Among these, blue signifies an incurable disease. In her past life, she revealed that a nun was going to die soon. The priestess was taken aback and claimed that she was possessed by a spirit of malice. She ordered the priest to lock her up in the chamber of repentance. She begged to be released, declaring that she had only said what she saw. Initially, she was imprisoned briefly for disrespecting the priestess, but when the nun eventually died as she had predicted, she was sent right back to the chamber of repentance, without understanding why. For 2 long years in that place, she lost a great deal of the power of the healing eye. In her past life, she had lost it so meaninglessly. This time, she would not let that happen. Before leaving, the nun told her to stay calm and copy scriptures like Sister Diana. In her past life, she had hated Diana, as they were always compared to each other. As a result, she had deliberately acted worse. But later, she realized that noble families were silently supporting Diana. If she had pretended to be like Diana, she might have escaped the orphanage sooner. However, in her past life, her pride had kept her from doing that, even if it killed her. But this time, she would live differently. If pretending to be Diana was what it took, then she would do it perfectly. In her past life, she could barely pass the scriptures evaluations because she couldn't read or write well. But now that she had come back to the past, copying scripture should have been no big deal. The first saint, Archaea, sacrificed her heart to the goddess to stop the spread of evil. In doing so, she brought about the miracle of holy reversal. However, when she looked at what she had written, it was gibberish. She quickly realized that her mind from her past life was not in sync with her new body. The art of writing and reading had been taught to her by the Duke's family. No matter how much she wrote, it was all the same. However, she was slowly getting better. Her stepbrother had never given up on her. Edward told her to show their father what she had been working on, as she had put in a lot of effort. She hesitated, saying that she would show it to them when she improved, but he assured her that even now, their father would be proud of her efforts, as a result. She showed them her writing. The Duke commented that she had done well. In her past life, he had been so harsh with her, punishing her for her supposed impurity toward Diana. Yet he had always waited for her and comforted her. Because of their patience, she eventually opened her heart and accepted them as family. The Duke noted that her lines were steady even when drawn long. With practice, she would surely develop a graceful hand, so there was no need to rush. Thinking about them now, she missed them. She wanted to meet them once more to apologize for her selfishness and mistakes. She also wanted to repay the love and kindness they had given her. She was practically a new person, and everyone noticed. Although she still had a long way to go, if she continued like this, she would be ready to meet with her family again. This life would be different from the last. Suddenly, a nun ran toward her and ordered her to hurry and change into a dress. The dress she was given was meant for meeting nobles, so she was confused as to why she had to wear it. The nun explained that important guests were here to see her. This was strange. There was no reason for anyone to come looking for her now. Who could it be? She had met the Duke for the first time after completely losing the healing eye at age 7. At age 8, she had left the temple and gone to the Duke's family. So, at only 5 years old now, no one should be visiting her. No matter how differently she had been living, it was too soon for her actions to have caused this. However, when the door opened, she struggled to hold back her tears, covering her mouth. Since that day, she had not forgotten them, not even in her dreams. How could she ever forget the people she had driven to their deaths? Her saviors, she was surprised. Why had the Duke's family come so soon? This wasn't what had happened in her previous life. But perhaps this was a good thing. This life gave her the opportunity to be with the Duke's family sooner. She had to make a good impression, but she kept getting overwhelmed with emotions. However, she tried to remain calm and do what she had practiced in her mind. Politely, she greeted them, "Hello, Duke. I am Bells, a 5-year-old girl with a healing ability." Surprisingly, she had never realized in her past life how passionately the Duke looked at her. She noticed Edwin and lowered her gaze. If she looked into Edwin's eyes right now, she felt like the tears she had been holding back would burst. So, she lowered her head and greeted him. Surprisingly, he asked if she had anything to say to him. Her lips trembled as she tried not to cry. She felt that the emotions she had been holding back would burst. Suddenly, he asked if he was not good-looking, which reminded her of how he was when he was older. She was barely holding back her tears, yet she was reminded of the past. Suddenly, she began crying uncontrollably. She thought it was crazy that she cried at their first meeting. Now, she looked foolish. Edwin asked if he had made a mistake. When she heard this, she lowered her head, believing that it was all her fault. But she disliked these emotions that didn't follow her heart. The child's body was uncomfortable. Meanwhile, the priest apologized, claiming that Bells was still young and seemed to have been surprised. However, no matter how young a child may be, they must know of the iron-blooded Duke family, who had no blood or tears. The iron-blooded Dukes, the Callios family, had produced sword masters who swept across battlefields for generations. The current Duke was also known as the merciless sword demon in his youth. However, rumors were exaggerated. The Duke's family was very generous, as they had not abandoned someone as useless as her, but instead supported her. Capri suggested that they visit again another time, claiming that she wasn't particularly useful. The Duke quickly shut him down, declaring that this was not something to discuss in front of child. The priest became nervous and agreed, declaring that Bells was their only hope. The child they had sent last time had failed to cure the second son. If it weren't for his son, he would have almost overlooked the fact that there had been no progress in the treatment. He was talking about the second son. At this time, the Duke of Callio's household was no different from a house in mourning. Even with other physicians and elixirs from across the empire, there were no signs of improvement in the second son's condition. In the end, the Duke had requested help from the temple as a last resort. The temple, having received a large donation, sent Diana to the Marquis residence at the Duke's request. However, even though Diana had powerful healing abilities, she could not completely cure the second son's illness. He had passed away in the year Bells turned 7, but until then, Diana had visited the Duke's residence for almost a year. However, it was too early for them to realize this. Yet, looking back on the Duke's words to her, something felt off. It was almost as if he remembered their past meeting. Suddenly, the Duke informed her that he had another child just like her, one who was dignified and well-mannered. She declared that she knew. He must be talking about Joshua, which took the priest and none by surprise. She explained that she had treated the young master during an event last year. That moment, Edward extended his hand and requested that she come with them to the Duke's estate. With teary eyes, she declared, yes, of course. She never thought she'd be heading to the Duke's manor this quickly. As much as he could place his trust in her, she would make sure to heal Joshua. Suddenly, the priest declared that there was something he wanted to discuss with her briefly and requested that the Duke proceed to the carriage first. However, Edward intervened and declared that if the priest had something to say, he must say it here. This irritated the priest, who insisted that it would only take a moment. As her guardian, he claimed he had a duty to offer some words of caution. The Duke agreed and decided they should go to the carriage first. However, Edwin declared that if anything happened, she should immediately come to them. She felt a wave of sensation, as if Edwin was trying to protect her, or maybe it was just her imagination. Once they left, the priest declared that she should only pretend to heal Joshua just enough and then return. Yes, this was the kind of person the priest truly was, treating patients just enough to make them return to the temple again. He was a greedy and vile man. His concern was that the disease, which even Diana couldn't cure, was beyond someone like her. From his perspective, whether she healed the second son or not, the temple would be put in a difficult position. If she couldn't heal him, they would have to return a portion of the substantial donation received from the Duke's family. If, by any chance, she claimed she had succeeded in healing him, it would mean admitting that Diana's abilities were insufficient. The temple intended to use her for sustained profit, so of course, they wouldn't want her value to diminish. In other words, they would rather refund the donations. However, if they repeatedly emphasized her weak abilities, it was likely they would make her the scapegoat if Joshua died. In other words, she wasn't even worth discarding. In the temple, her position wasn't even that of saintess candidate. She was merely a cheap substitute for Diana, something far easier to use, less burdensome, and disposable once they were done with her. However, in this life, she was bolder and asked the priest, "What happens if I actually manage to heal the young master?" The priest glared at her. "You talking back? You must be possessed by an evil spirit. Do you want to be confined in the chamber of repentance like Ismail?" Her eyes filled with trauma as she recalled someone like Diana and herself, someone who initially had special abilities who had been called to the temple a year ago, only to be returned to the orphanage just days later, stripped of both his abilities and his voice after being confined in the chamber of repentance. The priest explained, he was possessed by an evil spirit, so he was stripped of the blessings. But he still has his voice. And besides, you're just a child who has not yet attained the same status as a candidate. You must behave virtuously. That way, the goddess will bless you even more and continue to support you. These were words she had heard countless times in her past life. Words meant to control her, words that felt like poison. But she was never truly acknowledged by them, not even in her final moments. As much as it enraged her, she would comply for now. Soon, she would strike back. She reminded him that the Duke's family was waiting for her. He told her to go to them now. She lowered her head and declared, "Goodbye, High Priest Dog Sit." His face turned red with rage. "What did you just say?" She quickly ran off, laughing. "It's not Dog Sit, it's High Priest Dung Keski." When she arrived, Edwin spoke firmly. "It's time for us to go." He then asked, "Did the priest say anything strange to you?" She replied, "Of course not." Edwin, even in her past life, never particularly liked people associated with the temple. He never told her the reason, but despite that, he had still gotten engaged to Diana, who was supposed to become a saintess. It was probably because he truly loved her. When she realized this, it broke her heart. In the next scene, they arrived at the estate. The Duke apologized for making her rush without getting any breakfast, but he wanted her to check on Joshua immediately. She agreed. Upon meeting Joshua, Edwin comforted him, declaring their arrival. Edwin's younger brother, the Duke's youngest son, had a chronic illness that caused his wounds to bleed excessively. Seeing the child who had died in her past life felt strange. Maybe it was because they were in the same situation. She began examining him, checking his condition. The bandages wrapped around his leg looked new, but the edges were already soaked with blood. It was likely that the bleeding had never stopped from a previous wound. But as far as she remembered, Joshua's cause of death in her past life wasn't due to excessive bleeding. It was a heart attack. Then she saw it. An orange energy emanated from Joshua's heart. The same energy she had seen in patients with incurable diseases of unknown origin. Only she could see this, thanks to her memories from her past life. However, she was convinced. Every time a wound appeared, his already weak heart was strained to compensate for the blood loss. If that was the case, they needed to treat his heart first, not his injury. But then, she turned around and gasped. Edwin had the same energy on his chest. The energy wasn't coming from the knee injury. It was a completely different area, yet she felt the same energy coming from Edwin. That's when she realized this was a genetic disease. In her past life, she met Edwin after she had lost her healing power, so she had never noticed it in time. As far as she could tell, the Duke most likely had the same disease, yet she didn't sense any energy from him. That was strange. It must have been inherited from the late Duchess, who had passed away early on. However, upon looking at Edwin's energy, it seemed that the disease was still in its latent stage. If treated now, it could be cured. But Joshua was in danger. His wounds had been treated, but not his heart. They needed to treat his heart as soon as possible, before it was too late. At that moment, Dr. Gordon and Lady Caston entered the room. They had gathered some medicinal herbs to help with Master Joshua's recovery. Dr. Gordon immediately noticed her. "What are you doing?" She tried to explain. "I'm trying to heal him." But the doctor shouted, "That's not where the injury is." She hesitated. What should she do? She couldn't tell them that she had seen the cause of Joshua's incurable disease. If the existence of her healing power was revealed, something bad could happen to her. She didn't want her ability to be exposed in this life. But there was no way to explain it to them without mentioning her healing power. The doctor scowled. "I cannot allow you to touch the young master's body so carelessly." Lady Caston scoffed. Did the master really bring this child here? Her abilities don't even come close to Diana's. This woman was a dedicated maid that the late Duchess had brought from her family. She was also Joshua's nurse. Out of everyone, she had always disliked her the most. However, the Duke's expression darkened. "Watch your words." Lady Caston froze. The Duke continued. "This young lady is a valuable guest who has come to visit the Duke's residence. You should refrain from rude language." Lady Caston quickly apologized. Edwin inquires when Joshua's treatment will start, and she declares that she will begin now. She extends her finger and realizes that she has found the problem. 15 lights are floating, each containing life force. The life force within her body feels like an endless ocean, yet only a single thread comes out. She couldn't perform proper healing even in her past life, so she calms down, believing that she will definitely be of help in this life. Suddenly, a memory appears, Diana commenting that maybe she is weaker than her because she lacks faith in the goddess. Since power comes from faith, she shouldn't be impatient and should earnestly pray to the goddess. She had tried once more because she was busy praying to the goddess in her past life. Why did it have to be her who was born an orphan? However, if the goddess, Aria, sent her back to redo everything she messed up, then she wants the power to heal this child. If the goddess grants her this, she will no longer hate Diana or covet Edwin in this life. To be honest, the goddess had already favored Diana enough in her past life. She feels it, a tremendous power surging from within her body. She begins levitating, shining with a bright light that is almost blinding. When a light disappears, the room is silent for a few moments. Then, Lady Caston shouts that the young master is still unconscious, asking if there is something wrong with his body. When the doctor checks his wound, he declares that the bleeding has stopped and a scab is forming, which is proof that the wound is definitely healing. To make it even better, the energy in Joshua's heart is now almost gone, meaning they have probably passed the critical moment. Suddenly, Lady Caston sneers at the young master isn't waking up, adding that this is what they should have expected from an orphan who doesn't even know her own background. Then, Joshua stirs and exclaims, "Nanny, why is everyone gathered here?" Everyone rushes to Joshua, leaving her behind, feeling lonely. But what did she expect? Trying to interfere so shamelessly? However, she is glad that her magical power was effective. Joshua notices her and is informed that she was the one who healed him. He comments that she is truly clever and even came to keep her promise, which takes her off guard. However, she suddenly feels lightheaded, as if her head isn't working properly. Edwin notices this and tells her to take a break, but then her nose begins to bleed and her vision becomes blurry. It makes sense. This is the first time she has used so much divine energy all at once. In the next scene, we see her soul outside her body as she questions whether this is a dream. It seemed to be a birthday festival. Even if they are not saintly or holy, the children in the orphanage have outstanding talents. People believe that these children were blessed by the gods. Every year at the shrine, during the celebration of the goddess's birthday, they would showcase the children's talents. On these special days, she often hid in the forest, where people wouldn't go because she was tired of patients looking for her. That's when she sees herself talking to a young Joshua. She even declares that she'll treat his heart as a bonus. However, upon trying to heal it, she notices that it isn't going away as easily as she thought. Suddenly, his nanny begins calling him, and he decides to leave. They agree that when they meet again, she will treat the remaining illness. But she has to keep today's events a secret, as promised. When she was 4 years old, she had been heading to the backyard to avoid people asking for treatment at the birthday festival she participated in. But she got caught by Joshua, who was lost and injured, and ended up helping him. Unlike her, who brushed off the situation lightly, he had been waiting for that promise all along. But in this life, she will completely heal him and fulfill her promise, the one she forgot about in her past life. When she wakes up, she sees Joshua and Edwin staring over her bed. Joshua reveals that she had been healing him when she fainted. She notices that his skin has improved and the energy in his chest has decreased significantly. She declares that she will finish the treatment she couldn't complete earlier. Suddenly, Edwin grabs her hand and questions what she is doing. She explains that she is trying to treat the young master, but he frowns, reminding her that she has been getting nosebleeds. He wipes her nose and tells her to take it easy, as she only just woke up after an entire day. However, if the treatment fails and Joshua dies, Edwin would experience deep sorrow, just as he did in her past life. For the sake of the Duke's family, she needs to get rid of that energy. She is also chilled by the realization that while she treated the energy of the heart earlier, she did not actually heal his wounds. Although Joshua has woken up, the doctor will only focus on the remaining injuries and never call for her again. That means Joshua's heart will never receive full treatment. She declares that she can still use her magical powers, but the Duke enters and declares that she should stop Joshua's treatment. He explains that last year, Joshua was this lively. She quickly realizes that this was around the time they had met. If he's talking about when she met him in the temple's backyard, she had healed his injured knee perfectly. He hadn't told anyone the details because it was a secret, but it turns out she was the one who healed Joshua that day. The reason she was sponsored by the Duke's family before her regression was because, after Joshua's death, someone from the Duke's family discovered that his cause of death was a genetic disease. Remembering what Joshua had said while he was alive, they had urgently come to find her. The Duke requests that from now on, he wants her to oversee Joshua's treatment going forward. She smiles and tells him to leave it to her. Joshua declares that after finally meeting again, he doesn't want to watch his sister suffer. Suddenly, Dr. Gordon objects. He declares that even though the adults can see how pale she is in comparison to others, as a doctor, he finds her abilities extraordinary. Therefore, even more so, this child must not be allowed to continue the treatment. Using that level of divine power would put an enormous strain on her body. He even confirmed it when she had fainted. For a few moments, her heart had stopped beating. Upon hearing this, they were all stunned. They may not have fully understood what he meant, but they knew it was something gruesome. In her past life, the days she had spent in prison under the charges of attempting to take Diana's life were nothing short of a living hell. During her endless interrogations and horrific torture, she had uncovered another hidden ability within herself. The second prince, Kyrian Esterode, had held a heart in a jar. He discovered that any wound she received would heal instantly, and that she could survive without a heart. If the temple had known about this, they would have immediately treated her as a saintess. She cried, despair filling her face. Why do these things only happen to her? As she writhed in endless agony, she eventually faked her death. And when she opened her eyes again, she had returned to being a 5-year-old girl.